I'm not the murderer here. The murderer in this whole situation is home.
And I want to apologize to those that I let down for letting some suckers play me.
All he had to do was point the finger at me, and he went home. And I'm in jail for life.
Jimmy Henchman deserves everything they are doing to him in jail. That's the message many believe 50 Cent sent, cold and unbothered as his longtime rival lamented on camera over being sentenced to life in prison.
And I felt that that was something appropriate for the amount of years that I've been in the music business, that I would become a music czar when you have great artists like Game.
But who is Jimmy Henchman? Once a respected music mogul, he built an empire behind the scenes while hiding a darker world of violence, betrayal, and bloodshed. This is the story of James Rosemond, his climb from the streets, his double life in hip-hop, and his final broken moment behind bars as the world watched.
And so I want to apologize to all those who have lost their life, dedicated their life to the game. I want to apologize to you for what I allowed to happen to me.
When a clip surfaced online showing Jimmy Henchman, once a feared figure in both hip-hop and the streets, visibly emotional and appearing to lament over his life sentence, the internet lit up. But no reaction hit harder or felt more pointed than that of Curtis 50 Cent Jackson. His reaction had "Jimmy Henchman deserves this" all over. That was the message 50 Cent all but confirmed through his posts and tone: cold, direct, and unbothered. To many, it wasn't just commentary, it was the culmination of years of beef, betrayal, and bloodshed. Their rivalry wasn't just rooted in music politics, it ran deep into violence and street warfare. Henchman, whose real name is James Rosemond, had long been accused of orchestrating attacks against G-Unit members, including an alleged involvement in a plot to shoot and intimidate Tony Yayo after an incident involving Henchman's teenage son. Even more significantly, prosecutors tied Henchman to a murder-for-hire plot that resulted in the killing of Lowell "Lodi" Mac Fletcher, a G-Unit affiliate, in 2009.
Jimmy Henchman's son got slapped up. And that set off a whole really bad set of events.
Right.
Which ultimately, ended up with Jimmy Henchman in prison.
To satisfy Rosemond. After the assault on his son, Rosemond decided that a member of G-Unit had to die.
50 Cent never forgot. And when Henchman's downfall became public, he didn't miss the opportunity to strike back. This time, not with bullets, but with posts. Across social media platforms, 50 shared screenshots of federal court documents highlighting Henchman's convictions, especially his drug empire, money laundering charges, and multiple life sentences. He reposted articles labeling Henchman as a government informant, referencing the alleged cooperation Rosemond gave during earlier investigations, an allegation Henchman denied, but that circulated widely during his trials. And it wasn't new. 50 had been vocal about Henchman for years. Back in 2012, on the Lost Tape mixtape, he aimed lyrical jabs at Jimmy's street credibility, implying duplicity and weakness behind the tough exterior. In one track, he rapped, "I seen the paperwork, Jimmy, it's a rap now. You talking loyalty, but you're breaking down somehow." He also made pointed remarks in interviews, characterizing Henchman as a manipulator who used the industry as a smokescreen for organized crime. The music mogul facade, in 50's view, was just a disguise. So when the prison video of Henchman lamenting surfaced, 50 didn't hold back. To him, it wasn't sadness, it was karma. A man who once ordered hits and built a multi-million-dollar narcotics empire had been reduced to pleading for freedom on camera. The very public emotion was, in 50's eyes, a collapse of the gangster image Henchman had carefully curated. More than mockery, it was a digital eulogy, a final chapter in a feud that had cost lives, careers, and reputations. What stood out most wasn't the words, but the delivery. No hashtags, no drawn-out captions, just clipped, biting sarcasm that let everyone know 50 Cent wasn't here to forgive, forget, or feel sorry. For him, justice, however delayed, had been served. before his name became synonymous with federal indictments, street warfare, and life sentences, James "Jimmy Henchman" Rosemond was regarded as a legitimate force in the music industry. By the late 1990s and early 2000s, he had transformed himself from a troubled youth with a criminal past into a respected music executive, praised by many for his business acumen and industry connections. Rosemond's company, Czar Entertainment, wasn't just another artist management firm, it was a power hub. He played a key role in managing the careers of The Game, Sean Kingston, Gucci Mane, Brandy, Salt and Pepa, and even worked with Akon at one point. His clients were chart toppers, and his name held weight in boardroom negotiations and label meetings.
And I felt that that was something appropriate for the amount of years that I've been in the music business, that I would become a music czar when you have great artists like Game.
He was often seen at major industry events like the BET Awards, MTV red carpets, and record release parties, posing alongside executives, athletes, and fellow music moguls. Journalists once described him as a bridge between hip-hop and Hollywood, with the charisma and confidence of someone who could move between street culture and corporate America seamlessly. Jimmy Henchman cultivated the image of a man who had left the streets behind and found a new path in music. He presented himself as a deal maker, someone who could squash rap beefs, broker label agreements, and guide artists toward mainstream success. His ability to maneuver behind the scenes earned him praise, particularly when he helped broker the reconciliation between The Game and Interscope, following The Game's fallout with 50 Cent and G-Unit. In interviews, Rosemond often spoke like a man who understood the business of music, deeply talking about intellectual property, publishing rights, and ownership, while also using the language of the streets. It made him relatable to both artists and executives. At one point, he was in talks to launch a record label and expand into film and television development. But while Rosemond's image in the public eye was that of a buttoned-up businessman, law enforcement was building a very different narrative. According to federal prosecutors, the success of Czar Entertainment was allegedly propped up by an elaborate criminal enterprise, including drug money laundering, and intimidation tactics that blurred the lines between business and organized crime. Investigators later accused him of using his music business as a front, laundering proceeds from drug sales, transporting kilos of coke and road cases meant for musical equipment, and leveraging his influence in the industry to shield illegal activity. By the time the public caught wind of these accusations, the duality of Jimmy Henchman's life had become undeniable. To fans and artists, he was a mentor and mogul. To federal agents and prosecutors, he was a high-level drug operating under the cover of hip-hop. As Jimmy Henchman climbed the ranks of the music industry, building relationships with label executives, celebrities, and artists, federal agents claim he was living a double life, one of glitz and deals by day, and drug and power moves by night. According to investigations conducted by the Drug Enforcement Administration, DEA, and U.S. Attorney's Office for the Southern District of New York, Henchman was not just a manager or talent rep. Behind the scenes, he was allegedly orchestrating a massive bi-coastal coke operation, described in court as structured, sophisticated, and violent. Prosecutors said Rosemond's criminal organization was responsible for transporting hundreds of kilograms of coke from the West Coast to New York and the East Coast, using a network of couriers and hidden compartments. In one of the most shocking revelations from court documents, the DEA alleged that music equipment cases, the kind used for touring gear and sound equipment, were being repurposed to move bricks of coke across state lines. These cases would be shipped to recording studios, concert venues, or production spaces under the guise of business. The money from the drug sales, which reached into the millions of dollars, was then allegedly laundered through various business fronts. Some were real companies tied to Rosemond's entertainment ventures. Others, according to authorities, were shell corporations used solely to disguise illicit revenue. The feds weren't dealing with low-level hustling. This wasn't corner-based street dealing. This was transnational, involving encrypted communication, trusted operatives, and violence. Witnesses testified that Rosemond oversaw operations with the precision of a cartel boss, allegedly dictating who could move drugs in certain regions, and reportedly retaliating against those who interfered or disrespected him. In a 2012 federal indictment, U.S. prosecutors called him the CEO of a criminal enterprise and detailed how his music company was used to shield illegal activities from scrutiny. Investigators revealed that the T-Ficking network had ties to both Los Angeles suppliers and New York distributors, making it one of the more expansive and dangerous cases tied to a figure in hip-hop at the time. One DEA official was quoted as saying, "His image as a music impresario was a cover for the real Jimmy Rosemond, a thug in a suit who flooded those same streets with coke." Testimony from former associates, some of whom cooperated in exchange for reduced sentences, described Henchman as calculating, careful, and powerful, someone who knew how to insulate himself, using layers of intermediaries and encrypted BlackBerry messaging systems to avoid detection. But eventually, the walls closed in. In 2010, federal agents began issuing subpoenas, raiding storage facilities, and monitoring communications. By 2011, Rosemond was indicted on multiple counts, including conspiracy to distribute coke, obstruction of justice, and money laundering. The trial, which spanned months, pulled back the curtain on a man who, until then, had managed to stay both relevant and respected in the music world.
I got 20 years for money laundering. I got 10 years for obstruction of justice. I got 5 years for the machine gun. I got 10 years for a firearm.
To law enforcement, the image of Jimmy Henchman as a businessman was a mask. Underneath, they said, he was something far more dangerous. A drug kingpin who used fame and fear to operate unchecked. The long-simmering feud between Jimmy Henchman and 50 Cent wasn't just industry politics. It was personal. It was dangerous. And by the time it reached its peak, it had claimed lives. While many focused on the high-profile fallout between 50 Cent and The Game in 2005, a split rooted in loyalty disputes and creative tension, few realized who stood behind The Game, guiding him through the chaos. Jimmy Henchman. As The Game's manager and silent strategist, Henchman became more than a manager. He became an adversary to 50 Cent. Behind the scenes, Henchman used his influence to position The Game as a challenger to G-Unit's dominance. Interviews, diss records, and public appearances were carefully navigated. This wasn't just music beef, it was a proxy war. 2 camps, 2 leaders, 1 boiling point. That boiling point came on March 20th, 2007. That afternoon, outside the offices of Violator Management in Manhattan, 14-year-old James Rosemond Jr., Henchman's son, was arrested. According to NYPD reports, the teen was leaving the building wearing a Czar Entertainment sweatshirt when he was confronted by G-Unit members Tony Yayo and Lowell Lodi Mac Fletcher. Witnesses said the boy was slapped, cursed at, and threatened. The message was loud. The feud had turned personal. Yayo was arrested. Media headlines exploded. Yayo denied involvement, but surveillance footage and witness accounts contradicted him. Eventually, Lodi Mac took the fall, admitting he acted alone. Yayo accepted a plea deal and served 10 days of community service. Lodi Mac, on parole at the time, was sentenced to prison.
I felt like if it was my son, then, I don't know, maybe the same events might have occurred. So if you slap my son, you might meet your maker. That's just me.
But this wasn't over. For Jimmy Henchman, it wasn't just an insult, it was an act of war. Court documents and testimonies later revealed that Henchman quietly began assembling a network of trusted associates to plan retaliation. Phone calls were intercepted, surveillance was conducted, plans were set in motion. On September 27, 2009, just 2 weeks after his release from prison, Lodi Mac was gunned down in the Bronx. Execution style. Federal prosecutors would later allege that this was no coincidence. In 2014, the government charged Jimmy Henchman with orchestrating the murder of Lodi Mac as revenge for the attack on his son. According to testimony from cooperating witnesses, Henchman offered $30,000 in cash to have the hit carried out. One of the shooters confessed and provided detailed accounts of how the murder was planned and executed. The case was a turning point. It shifted the narrative of Henchman from music executive with a dark past to convicted mastermind of a murder-for-hire plot. The courtroom testimony described him as calculated and methodical. The murder wasn't impulsive, it was deliberate. To law enforcement, it was the moment the feud became fatal. To 50 Cent, it was personal. Though he didn't speak much publicly about Loudy Mac's murder, his tone toward Henchman grew colder and sharper after the conviction. The loss of an affiliate cut deep. From allegedly shooting Suge Knight in the knee after Suga disrespected one of his people, and warning Suga that the next bullet would be higher, Jimmy Henchman was a menace.
Was on the phone call with Suge and Jimmy Henchman. I got into it over the phone. Nigga, next time I'm gonna have to do raise that shot up a little higher and gonna be to your head.
Jimmy Henchman's name also surfaced in one of hip-hop's most mysterious and tragic events, the 1994 Quad Studios shooting of Tupac Shakur.
Jimmy Henchman, I remember like yesterday, Jimmy Henchman said, "You don't want to go to war because you don't got your money right."
In 2011, convicted drug dealer and former Henchman associate Dexter Isaac came forward, claiming in a public confession that he was paid by Henchman to orchestrate the robbery and assault of Tupac at Quad Studios. Isaac detailed how he and others lured Tupac into the studio lobby, where he was ambushed, shot, and robbed of jewelry. According to Isaac, Henchman had been angry at Tupac over business disputes, and the attack was meant to send a message.
Did you or did you not have anything to do with him being robbed or shot at Quad Studios in 1994?
Absolutely never even knew about it, never heard about it.
Though Henchman denied the allegations, the timing and detail of the confession caused shockwaves. For many, it was the first time someone had openly connected Henchman to a violent attack on one of hip-hop's most iconic figures. This wasn't the only time Henchman would be linked to violent plots. Prosecutors would later outline a pattern: bribes, retaliation, and calculated moves to eliminate perceived threats. Whether it was through direct violence or hired guns, Henchman allegedly built an empire that thrived on fear and control. Robberies, hits, and federal indictments became recurring chapters in his life. His reputation on the streets, one of ruthlessness and reach, was no longer rumor. It was backed by wiretaps, testimonies, and convictions. By 2014, James Jimmy Henchman Rosemond was no longer just a high-profile figure under investigation. He was a convicted felon facing the full weight of the U.S. justice system. That year, a federal jury in Manhattan found him guilty of orchestrating a murder-for-hire plot, one that led directly to the cold-blooded killing of Lowell "Loudy Mac" Fletcher, a known G-Unit affiliate. The motive? Revenge. According to federal prosecutors, Rosemond had plotted the murder as retaliation for the 2007 incident where his teenage son was outside a Manhattan building, an altercation linked to Tony Yayo and Fletcher. Prosecutors laid out the timeline. After Fletcher's release from prison, Rosemond allegedly paid $30,000 to two men to hunt him down and kill him. Witnesses testified that Rosemond had explicitly ordered the hit and made sure it was carried out with no traceable ties to himself. But the plan fell apart. One of the men involved, Brian "Slim" McLeod, became a cooperating witness after his arrest and eventually revealed the details of the hit to investigators. Cell phone records, cash transfers, and multiple testimonies connected the dots, painting a damning picture of Henchman as the mastermind. On March 5, 2014, the jury returned a guilty verdict, and Rosemond was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole for his role in the murder for hire. It was a stunning fall from industry mogul to a man shackled in federal court, convicted of using violence to settle personal scores. But his legal troubles didn't end there. In a separate federal trial, Rosemond was also tried and convicted for running a massive bi-coastal drug empire, a charge stemming from the earlier DEA investigations into his operation. According to court documents, Rosemond and his organization had distributed hundreds of kilograms of coke, primarily between California and New York, using music industry fronts and courier systems disguised as legitimate business operations.
They sentenced me to 7 life sentences for drugs. Can you imagine me and El Chapo have the same drug?
The case revealed a sprawling operation with encrypted phones, trusted runners, and coordinated laundering through companies affiliated with the entertainment world. The feds referred to it as a criminal enterprise masked by celebrity, and the evidence was overwhelming. Ledgers, testimonies, drug seizures, and wiretaps. That conviction resulted in another life sentence, along with an additional 20 years to be served consecutively. Despite multiple attempts to appeal with Henchman's lawyers arguing misconduct, unreliable witnesses, and biased prosecution, every verdict was upheld. The courts affirmed that the evidence met the burden of proof and that the sentences were appropriate given the scale and nature of his crimes. From 2014 to 2018, Rosemond remained in the headlines not for new music ventures, but for legal defeats. Each denied appeal was another nail in the coffin of a once feared and respected figure. Now, with 2 life sentences plus 20 years stacked against him, Jimmy Henchman became a rare example of a hip-hop figure who couldn't outrun the streets even with millions, lawyers, and fame behind him. Footage of Jimmy Henchman speaking emotionally from behind bars sparked debate across social media. He expressed regret, confusion, and a sense of betrayal by the system. While some fans and industry insiders showed sympathy, others, like 50 Cent, saw it as a final unraveling. Where Henchman once moved in silence, now his most vulnerable moments were public. The contrast between his once feared reputation and his new reality behind bars was stark. By 2021, with 2 life sentences and multiple appeals denied, Jimmy Henchman Rosemond turned to what many considered his last chance at freedom, a clemency petition directed at President Donald Trump. It was a calculated and desperate move, submitted during Trump's final days in office, when dozens of controversial pardons were being handed out to celebrities, political allies, and even convicted felons with high-powered connections. Rosemond's legal team crafted a petition rooted in 2 narratives. First, that his trial was flawed, marked by prosecutorial misconduct, conflicting witness statements, and alleged bias in sentencing. Second, that Rosemond had undergone a personal transformation behind bars. They cited his work mentoring younger inmates, facilitating peace-building discussions, and actively participating in rehabilitation and anti-violence initiatives within the federal prison system. The clemency appeal also included letters from supporters, a small but vocal group who argued that, regardless of his past, Rosemond had demonstrated remorse and should be given the opportunity to live out the remainder of his life outside prison walls. They emphasized the human side of his story. A father, a businessman, and a once influential voice in the music industry who had lost everything. According to reports from the Washington Post, Rosemond's case was reviewed and considered for Trump's final day clemency list. He wasn't alone. Hundreds of names were submitted, and the White House had quietly been vetting cases with legal and political implications. Behind closed doors, it was said that Rosemond's case sparked debate. Some advisors were sympathetic, others were wary of the optics. Ultimately, Rosemond's name didn't make the cut. On January 20th, 2021, the final list was released. Dozens walked free. Henchman was not among them. No statement was issued. His petition had been denied silently and permanently. For Rosemond, it marked the collapse of his final hope. And for many who followed his story, especially those connected to his victims, it felt like justice had held the line. Once hailed as a power broker who could unite warring artists and command respect from both industry elites and street figures, Jimmy Henchman's legacy has been buried beneath convictions, allegations, and violence. He remains incarcerated, serving multiple life sentences with little chance of release. His name, once whispered in powerful circles, is now more often spoken in cautionary tales. For 50 Cent, Jimmy Henchman's downfall is personal. It's the closing of a long, bitter chapter filled with betrayal and violence. While others debate over rehabilitation and second chances, 50 remains unmoved. To him, this isn't tragedy, it's closure. It's the street finally settling its score. And in his words, Jimmy Henchman deserves this.